Hello and welcome back to NoBS. Today we're talking about the presidential election currently going on here in the United States of America. It's of course Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. Donald Trump, the incumbent, hopefully winning re-election so we could keep this country sane and safe, and also so we can keep our taxes low and reasonable. The big thing that Joe Biden promises, he literally says right out the gate, he's going to raise taxes. So if you vote for Joe Biden, your taxes will go up, and that's what we want to talk more about today. We've talked about this pretty extensively in other videos. Specifically, recently, we went over a new endorsement for Trump that happened because of this. 50 Cent, a popular rapper and actor and also a prominent African-American in America, well, he straight up endorsed Trump earlier this week because of this very issue. He said, if Biden's going to raise taxes and tax people up to 60% in some of the worst states, well, that's a reason not to vote for the guy. That's a pretty big, pretty watershed moment, really. I mean, this is a make or break reason. I know it is for me, and that's why I want to talk more specifically about it, let you guys know the information and what's going on, because as you could see by this tweet from Mike Pence, it says American households stand to lose $6,500 each year under Joe Biden's radical left agenda. So this is a concrete number. It definitely will vary. It's not exactly specific to every living situation, but so you know, thousands of dollars a year we're going to lose under the Joe Biden plan. Sure, they have excuses. Sure, they pretend they're going to just tax the rich, but that's what Democrats always say. They say we're going to raise taxes on the rich, but it always ends up coming back to taxing the middle class and the regular people, and things get worse for us down here. Rich people can afford to pay more taxes, and what happens when they have to is they end up spending less. They don't hire as many people. Their companies can't expand, so it hurts the little guy indirectly too. In addition, the Democrats are liars and will definitely raise taxes on everyone as well. So it's a really bad sign, and I'm glad Mike Pence, our great VP, is sharing this and giving us a more concrete number, because saying you're going to get your taxes raised is one thing. People might not expect it to be much, couple $100, maybe 1,000, whichever, but when you see it's going to be over $6,000, I think that's really scary, and that's make or break for a lot of people too. I know I don't have that kind of money to spare. I need to make sure I have a tight budget and everything goes to the right places. I have a family, I have a dog, I have a kid on the way. So a lot of people are like that, like me. And if you feel this way, you should really be interested in more of this story. More details in this article. It says Biden's economic plan could crush nation's recovery from coronavirus pandemic, conservative economists say. The Democratic presidential candidate's plan would ultimately result in about 4.9 million fewer full-time employees. So that's another sign. That's another thing we mentioned, that raising taxes affects a lot of things. It's not just everyone paying more taxes on the tax day in April or whichever. It's also companies having less budgets, having less expansion, having less ability to hire people, which affects thus in the middle class and the lower class and people looking for jobs, stuff like that. So it goes down the line. It's not a good sign. And it's also, like they say in this intro, in this title, it could crush our recovery from this pandemic. The pandemic is only starting to possibly wind down. I don't know. The Democrats pretend it's going to last forever and they want to hype it up as much as they can before the election. But I think most realistic people realize that it's toning down. The economy could reopen and come back up. People are starting to work again. But if they raise taxes like they plan, it's going to stop that. And we could get back into a bad depression. And the funny part about that is the Democrats will get away with it because they're going to just blame it on the virus. They're going to say we're in a depression because of the virus, which they overhyped. They caused all the lockdowns. They made it a bigger deal. They're causing the economy to close and to do badly because of high taxes. So it's really just a bad situation that they're exploiting and using against us. Joe Biden's economic agenda could destroy millions of American jobs and crush the nation's slow but steady recovery from the coronavirus pandemic, according to new projections from President Trump's former economists. The Democratic presidential candidate's plan would ultimately result in about 4.9 million fewer full-time employees and reduce the nation's GDP, the broadest measures of goods and services produced in the country, by more than 8% over the next decade, according to the report, which was authored by Casey Mulligan, a University of Chicago professor who previously served as chief economist of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. Kevin Hassett, also a former White House economist, now at Stanford University's Hoover Institution, Timothy Fitzgerald, and Cody Kalin. So another strong prediction, talking about 8% over a decade going down in our GDP. That's another bad sign for the nation. The GDP, of course, is the sign and the indication of a good economy, of a lot of wealth, a lot lot of business going on in your area. So to see this happen this way is certainly not a good prediction, and I think they're onto something for sure. A Biden presidency would translate into a loss of roughly $6,000 per household per year, the study shows. The economists projected that Biden's plan to expand subsidies for health insurance under the Affordable Care Act, undo some of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and increase the taxation of corporations and establish new environmental standards, reversing years of regulatory reform, would discourage Americans from working more and earning more. The former vice president has unveiled a multi-trillion-dollar agenda that would be funded in large part by higher taxes on wealthy U.S. households, which he describes as anyone earning more than $400,000 annually in corporations. That includes higher tax income rates and expansion of the payroll tax for Social Security and new tax credits and fewer deductions. So there is other implications there. They try to use that 400,000 bracket to pretend that it only affects those kinds of rich people, but the truth is there are other smaller taxes. There are going to be less credits, fewer deductions, which help you pay less. And in general, it's a silly plan. It's overhyped. It's overpriced. It reminds me of the Green New Deal, which is something else Biden has tacitly approved of and then denied approval of. And essentially, it's the Democrats. They want to tax you to death. They don't let you keep your own money. You don't get to spend it on what you want. They think they know better, so they take your money and spend it on things that usually you don't need. They're going to spend money on stuff for themselves. They're going to embezzle it. They're going to give health care to illegal immigrants, other crazy stuff like that. That's just not the way this country should be or the way the people want it to be run. Almost 80% of the tax increases backed by Biden would land on the top 1% of earners in the U.S., according to a recent projection from the Penn-Wharton Budget Model, a nonpartisan group at the University of Penn's Wharton School. Biden has pledged to hike corporate tax from 21 to 28% on day one if he wins the November 3rd election, regardless of the nation's unemployment rate. I'd make the changes on the corporate taxes on day one, he told CNN's Jake Tapper in mid-September. And the reason I'd make changes to corporate taxes, it can raise $1 trillion if they just started paying 28% instead of 21. What are they doing? They're not hiring more people. On top of that, Biden has promised to roll back other changes made by Trump in 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, including restoring the top individual income tax bracket to 39.6% from 37% for those earning more than $400,000 annually. Now, granted, that is a lot of money. This is a high tax bracket. It's going towards the top 1%, but there is a trickle down here. I know people are against that term. People think Reagan made it up and it doesn't affect things, but it is a trickle. It does affect the whole atmosphere, your town, your area. If the rich people can't spend, it just runs down business and opportunities and other things that aren't really mentioned. It's indirect, but it's worth noting. That would result in an average tax increase of nearly $300,000 for households in the top 1% of the country, compared to a $260 per year increase for those in the middle, according to Tax Policy Center. Biden has also said he will subject wages above $400,000 to the 12% payroll tax, creating a so-called donut hole for earnings between $137,000 and $400,000, which would be exempt. Other analysis of Biden's tax plans are more optimistic. Findings from the Penn-Wharton budget model estimate it would cause the nation's GDP to shrink by 0.4% in 2030 and by 0.8% in 2050. A separate report released by Moody's Analytics found that Biden would create roughly 7 million more jobs than Trump if he wins the November election. Now, that's questionable. I'm not sure if that's really going to be the case, especially other factors going on, especially if we continue these lockdowns and go on with this whole Democratic silliness. But I think the thing is, they will stop them. I mean, everything's going to stop and change after the election, regardless of which way it goes. I think the whole hype around the virus is going to go away and a lot of the tax and stuff will go away. But obviously, there's going to be sore losers and happy winners. I think the Democrats are going to take it bad if they lose. God willing, Trump wins. I think they're going to react probably as bad or worse than 2016 when they all cried like little babies and freaked out, and have since then for the last 4 years pretended that Trump cheated with no evidence. Meanwhile, Biden has lots of corruption in his past, lots of stuff coming out just this week, laptops, his son's corruption, him getting his son a job, getting kickbacks from that, illegal stuff's on Hunter Biden's laptop too. He might be going to jail very soon. So that's another thing that the media is ignoring. And we're talking about the taxes again. And I think it's much more complicated than people really think. And most people think, oh, it's only for people that make this much. But the truth is there's a lot more to it. And I think this article has a good explanation. That's why I wanted to go over it with you today. So with that said, that about wraps things up. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. Tell me what you think about Joe Biden, whether you think he's going to win the election, whether you approve of his tax tax raises. If you think that's going to affect you, tell me in the comments below. If you think Trump's going to win, comment Trump 2020 below. Also, if you have a moment, hit the like button to help get this video shared. That really helps us out. You could subscribe if you're new and hit the bell for notifications too. Until next time, have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow.